My farm isn't just land, it's legacy. For 5 generations, my family has tended this soil, growing food not just for ourselves, but for the entire community. 10 years ago, my parents retired to a quieter home nearby, leaving the farm in my hands. I took over with pride, determined to keep it thriving. And I did. We built a reputation for organic, fresh produce, the kind people drive miles for, the kind that reminds you of what food is supposed to taste like. It wasn't just my business, it was my life's work. But then, he moved in, and everything changed. 2 years ago, the land across from mine was sold. It was perfect farmland, lush, fertile, and drenched in sunlight. So when the new owner, a guy named Tom, paved the entire thing over with concrete, I knew right away. He wasn't here to farm. At first I didn't care. Live and let live, right? If he wanted to build houses, fine. But then, one afternoon, he walked right up to my fence with an easy grin on his face. "Hey, long time no see," Tom said, leaning against a post like we were old friends. I hadn't seen him in months, so his sudden friendliness caught me off guard. "Hey, Tom." I nodded. "What's up?" He smiled. "I got a business proposition for you." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "I want to buy your land." I laughed. "You're joking." Tom's grin didn't budge. "Nope. I'll give you, let's say, $20,000. I blinked. "Wait, you think my farm is worth 20 grand? He pulled out his checkbook like he was ready to buy my life some work on the spot. I was so stunned I almost didn't know what to say. Then I finally snapped out of it. "Tom, my farm isn't for sale." His smile vanished. Tom's eyes narrowed. "What?" His voice was too quiet. "I said no," I repeated. "This farm has been in my family for generations. It's not for sale at any price." Tom scoffed. "You're lucky I'm even offering you money." Then he did something insane. He crossed out $20,000 on his check and wrote $15,000 instead. "There," he said, shoving it toward me. "Take it or leave it." I stared at him. "You just lowered the offer." He shrugged. "Yeah, you hesitated. I don't like hesitation." I felt my fists clench. "Well then, leave it." Tom's face twisted with rage. "You can't just say no," he hissed. "This land isn't worth anything to you." "Actually," I countered, "it's worth about $300,000, and that's just the land. The house makes it worth even more." Tom's eye twitched. For the next hour we went back and forth. He threw out every manipulative argument he could think of. "You're just a farmer. What do you need all this land for? I'll build a mansion here. You can't honestly think a few crops are worth more than that. Be grateful I'm even offering you anything." Each time I shut him down. Finally he snapped. His voice dropped into a low, dangerous growl. "This isn't over," he said. "I will have this land." Then he turned on his heel and stormed off. I should have known then. This wasn't just a bad deal. It was the beginning of a war. Tom had made his intentions clear. He wasn't just interested in my land, he was obsessed with taking it. At first I thought he was just bluffing, that he'd throw his tantrum, realize I wasn't budging, and move on. I was wrong, because over the next few weeks he made my life hell. The very next morning, I walked out to check on my animals when I saw Tom standing at my fence, arms crossed, watching me. I ignored him and got to work, but as I fed my goats he called out, "You're making a mistake." I didn't respond. "You're running out of time, you know." I turned to face him. "Time for what?" he smirked. "To do the right thing and sell me this land." I shook my head. "Not happening, Tom." His smirk vanished. "You will." That was just day one. Every day that week, Tom showed up, leaning against my fence, throwing insults, muttering threats under his breath. By the second week he stopped, pretending to be polite. He called me lazy, claiming I was wasting the land. He said my farm was worthless and that I'd regret not selling. And the worst one, "You're just a farmer, what do you even matter?" It was infuriating, but I still thought he'd get bored and move on. Then the vandalism started. One morning I stepped outside, and my heart dropped. My house had been spray painted. the walls, the fence, even the barn. The words were unmistakable: "Sell get," out along with some less than friendly gestures in red paint. My stomach turned. This wasn't just an argument anymore. Tom was trying to intimidate me. I took pictures before cleaning it off. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the last time. And I was right, because the next phase of his plan was even worse. A few days later, I came home from a farmer's market with a truckload of fresh produce, only to find Tom's truck parked right in my driveway, blocking the entrance. I honked my horn. No movement. I got out, gritted my teeth, and walked over to his house, banged on the door. Tom opened it with a smirk. "Problem?" he asked. "Move your truck." He yawned. "Oh, that's my driveway now. Thought I'd use it." I clenched my fists. "Tom, this is childish. Move the damn truck." He just grinned wider. I had no choice but to park down the road and carry everything by hand. And of course, Tom walked alongside me the entire time, laughing, hurling insults, calling me a fool. This continued for a week. Every single day he'd block my driveway, and every single day I had to find another way in. I was at my breaking point. But then he took it a step further. One afternoon I was inside when I heard a loud knock on my door. I opened it to find 2 police officers. "Sir," one of them said, "we received multiple complaints from this address." I frowned. "What complaints?" The officer checked his notes. "Reports of loud, disruptive parties happening nearly every night." I blinked. "I live alone, on a farm. I don't throw parties. I'm usually in bed by 9 p.m. "There must be a mistake," I said. "Who filed the complaint?" The officers exchanged a look. Then they told me, "Tom, I should have known." As if that wasn't enough, Tom had also accused me of dealing drugs from my property. "Would you mind if we take a look around?" the officer asked. I was so angry, but I had nothing to hide, so I let them in. Big mistake. The cops searched my house, my barn, my truck, and of course, they found nothing. After an hour, they sighed, apologized, and said they'd follow up on Tom's false report. That's when I realized something. Tom had officially crossed the line. This wasn't just some petty feud. He was actively trying to ruin my life. I had played defense long enough. Now it was time to fight back. Tom had harassed me, vandalized my property, and even tried to get me arrested. But he wasn't done yet. Because when intimidation and false police reports didn't work, he escalated in the worst way possible. And this time, he put lives at risk. It was a crisp morning, just before sunrise. I was sipping coffee, going over my orders for the day, when I heard something strange outside, bleating, clucking. A loud moo. It took a second for my sleepy brain to process what was wrong. Then it hit me. The animals weren't supposed to be out. My stomach dropped as I sprinted outside, and my heart stopped. The pens were wide open. Goats, chickens, cows. All of them were loose, wandering onto the road, right into traffic. Horns blared as cars slammed on their brakes to avoid hitting them. I could see my neighbors running outside, confused, and trying to help. And standing in the middle of all the chaos, Tom, arms crossed, laughing. "I didn't think." I charged straight at him. "You did this?" I shouted, chest heaving. Tom smirked. "Told you I won't stop until I have this land." My hands shook with fury. "This isn't just harassment anymore." "Tom?" I growled. "You could have gotten someone killed." He shrugged. "Not my problem." I saw red. This man was beyond reasoning. But what he didn't know, he had just given me everything I needed to destroy him. The town rallied behind me. After seeing him laugh while my animals ran loose, the entire community turned against him. Some even shared their own stories about Tom's harassment, stories they had been too afraid to report before. One neighbor said, 1. Tom had tried bribing them into selling their house. Another claimed he had threatened their kids for playing near his property. A few even suspected he had sabotaged other farms. And the best part? I had proof. Because after weeks of dealing with Tom's insanity, I had done the smartest thing possible. I had installed security cameras around my farm. And guess what? They caught Tom in the act. Footage of him spray painting my house, footage of him dumping garbage on my land. And now, footage of him sneaking onto my property and unlocking the animal pens. With this evidence, I didn't just go to the police. I went to a lawyer. That afternoon, I walked into the police station with a USB drive full of video evidence. I didn't just file one complaint. I filed for trespassing, vandalism, harassment, animal endangerment. And the biggest one, criminal negligence, for nearly causing a major accident with my escaped animals. The officers took one look at the footage and their expressions hardened. "This is serious," one of them muttered. Oh, I knew. And Tom was about to find out just how serious it was, because less than a week later, the cops showed up at his doorstep with handcuffs. Tom had pushed things too far, and now he was finally facing the consequences. The day the cops came to drag him away, I stood by my fence, arms crossed, watching it happen. It was glorious. But just when I thought this nightmare was over, I uncovered something even worse. Because Tom, he wasn't just a bad neighbor, he was hiding something big. The morning was calm, almost too peaceful, until the sound of sirens cut through the air. I walked outside just in time to see 2 police cars pulling up in front of Tom's house. A couple of officers got out, their hands resting on their belts. I could see Tom standing on his porch, looking smug, as if he thought this was all just a joke. Then one of the cops said, "Tom Robertson, you're under arrest." His smirk vanished. "For what?" he demanded, stepping back. The officer pulled out a warrant. Trespassing, vandalism, harassment, and criminal negligence. I expected Tom to get angry, to lash out, to yell, but instead, he laughed. "This is ridiculous," Tom sneered as the officers cuffed him. "I'm a respected businessman. Do you know who I am?" One of the cops looked bored. "Yeah, we do, and we also know what you've been up to." Tom turned his head toward me, eyes burning with hatred. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "You think you've won?" I just smiled. "I don't think, Tom, I know." The cops shoved him into the back of the squad car, and just like that, he was gone. But little did I know, this wasn't the end. Because when I dug deeper into Tom's past, I found something that changed everything. With Tom finally out of the picture, I had some breathing room. But one thing bothered me. How had he gotten away with so much for so long? I started asking around, talking to neighbors, digging into public records, and what I found was unbelievable. The houses he had built, most of them were illegal, built without proper permits. The business he ran, a shady real estate scheme where he bullied people into selling cheap, then flipped properties for a huge profit. And the worst part? He was under investigation for running a fraudulent online gambling ring. That's right. My insane neighbor wasn't just a real estate scammer, he was a full-blown criminal. Armed with this new information, I handed everything over to the police. And apparently, they were already looking into him. My complaint had been the final push they needed to fully investigate his operations. And soon enough, it became clear. Tom wasn't just facing misdemeanor charges, he was facing felony charges, which meant prison for a long time. A month after his arrest, Tom's property was seized. His real estate empire crumbled overnight, and his precious concrete lot across from my farm, it went up for auction. And the best part? A local farming family bought it. Not another developer, not another scammer, a real farm. For the first time in 2 years, I could finally look across my land and see something worthwhile. And as for Tom, well, let's just say he wasn't coming back anytime soon. Tom was gone. His illegal empire had crumbled. His fraudulent businesses were exposed, and his precious land, the one he was so desperate to take from me, had been sold to real farmers who would actually use it the right way. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. But what I didn't expect was that this entire ordeal would actually make my farm more successful than ever. Tom's downfall became a big story in town. Neighbors who had once kept quiet now spoke up, sharing their own experiences with him. People he had tried to bully into selling came forward. Families he had scammed into renting illegal homes started filing complaints. Even businesses he had cheated in deals wanted justice. And as the news spread, so did something else. Support for my farm. After everything that had happened, locals saw my farm as a symbol of resilience. People who had never visited before started coming by just to support me. Farmers markets saw a huge increase in people asking for my products. My online orders tripled as people from other towns heard my story. Even local businesses started partnering with me, wanting to showcase my produce. What Tom had meant as a tactic to break me had actually made me stronger than ever. And the best part? The family that bought Tom's land reached out to me soon after the sale. They had heard my story and wanted to know if I was interested in collaborating with them to expand farming operations. So, in a poetic twist of fate, the land that Tom wanted so badly for himself, the land he tried to steal, was now being used to grow crops and raise animals just like mine. Everything he had tried to stop was now thriving. One evening I stood on my porch, looking out over my farm, the land that had survived generations and survived Tom. My animals were safe, my business was booming, and best of all, I no longer had to worry about a crazy neighbor trying to steal it all from me. My wife stepped out onto the porch, handing me a cup of tea. "Thinking about him again?" she asked with a smirk. I chuckled. "Not really. Just enjoying the view." She leaned against me. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" I took a slow sip of tea, then smiled. No, because Tom wasn't just in jail for a few months. His gambling fraud had landed him a full 10-year sentence. By the time he got out, I'd be even more successful than I already was. And that was the ultimate revenge. This whole experience taught me something important. Bullies only win if you let them. Tom tried to intimidate me. He tried to buy me out, break me down, and scare me off. But in the end, he lost everything. And I got to keep the one thing that mattered most, my farm. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. Don't forget to tap the bell icon to stay updated. Your support means the world.